Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Michigan Pet Alliance Roundtable. We are here to discuss a brand new initiative, Protect My Pet. It's a website, protectmypet.com. We have an esteemed panel here to take your questions. That's why we are here tonight. We want to know what you think about this and get your questions answered. We're going to be here for approximately an hour or so we have plenty of time to cover all of the bases. And let me introduce the people here to answer the questions tonight. This was all started by Genesee County Sheriff Christopher Swanson. Thank you for being here tonight. Also with us is Tanya Hilgendorf. She's the President CEO of the Humane Society of Huron Valley, which is Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County. She's also the Vice Chair of the Michigan Pet Alliance. Alina Clark is an assistant Genesee County prosecutor. She is in the trenches with animal abuse cases. Richard Angelo is a legislative attorney for Best Friends Animal Society and a board member of the Michigan Pet Alliance. And Will Miller, who's the 16th District Oakland County Commissioner. Thank you all for being here. Let's get a quick overview from everybody on this panel, starting with the sheriff. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks to everybody being here. I know that taking an hour in a busy life is a big deal, and that's why we're not going to waste your time. What we speak of is dynamic truth. And as a police officer for over 30 years and seeing the constant movement of getting more and more violent against animals, the timing was right to bring experts together. We have so many people could be on this panel, 500 deep, our animal control and humane societies and our rescues. But the bottom line is it's going to take everybody to make this thing happen. And this thing is simple, and that is we're going to take it to the people in November of 2024, a ballot initiative that's going to say, do you want people that are convicted of animal abuse, neglect, torture, starvation to be identified for those rescues and shelters and those that are out there to know that they've already been convicted of this horrific crime? They should not get another chance. An animal should have a right not to be subjected to that again. So that pet registry is strictly for that. We'll talk more about that. But the other thing is that closure of the loop when it comes to these animals getting rehomed. I work hand in hand with our animal control up in Genesee County. Tanya's going to tell you about animals that have been housed for an insane amount of time. We want to get those animals rehomed within 22 days. So I'm just glad to be here because I have seen enough, and as the sheriff, I get to have a platform and some influence, and then bringing this panel together and everybody out there, it's going to be unstoppable. That's why I'm here.
All right. We want to take your questions, type them into the chat box. We're going to read them as we progress here. Tanya, you're here from the Pet Alliance.
Yes.
What brought you here tonight? Why are you here? And what is the Pet Alliance?
Well, the Michigan Pet Alliance is an association of shelters, rescues, animal control facilities, and animal lovers. And our goal is really to provide training to people who are working in the field, improve practices and standards of care, and also to create better public policy for animals, so better protections. So really we want to bring everybody together to speak with one voice for the voiceless. I'm also representing my own organization, and we are the largest shelter in Michigan, serving the most animals in terms of getting the most out the door and adopted. We take in and care for, in one way or another, about 25,000 animals a year.
Wow.
No-kill shelter. And providing a variety of services, but we also are the animal control as well. So we're a private nonprofit, but also we're contracted to provide the animal control services. So we have field officers, we enforce animal cruelty for Washtenaw County, and investigate about 500 cases of animal cruelty a year. And then we take care of the animals who are going through the prosecutorial process. So that's why we're here. We're really excited about many parts of this initiative. Personally, I know after being at HSHV for 18 years, I can tell you that we need to do a better job at protecting animals. And this is one big step towards that. Most people think of their animals as family, right? We buy them birthday presents, we let them sleep in our beds. We love them dearly. They give us unconditional love that sometimes we can't get anywhere else. They're our lifesavers, right? They help our mental health, our physical health. They help us live longer. They're good for kids. They're good for the elderly. What do we owe them, right? We have to think, what do we owe them? Animals, we know, they have feeling just like us. Science says They're smart, they're emotional, they're social, and they suffer physically and emotionally very similar to humans. But animals are our most vulnerable population. They can't speak out for themselves. They can't call 911 and ask for help. So we have to do more to protect those animals. And the other thing I know after 18 years of doing animal welfare is there is a huge chasm between public sentiment and our laws and regulations. People, almost all people, pet owners or not, despise animal cruelty, and they want to see animals better protected. But animals don't vote, right? And they don't donate to political campaigns.
Pay taxes.
They don't pay taxes, right? But so it is on us to say,
That's right.
we are here. We're going to protect you, and we need courageous people. We have some officials here today who I think are different in terms of politicians who are willing to stand up for animals. That takes courage. It takes integrity. It takes foresight to really understand that it is our job to protect animals.
Now, this is going to be political and somewhat of a legislative process. We have with us Richard Angelo, who is a legislative attorney. You are here tonight. Why?
Well, I've been a resident of Michigan all my life, and I've been practicing law in Michigan. I was, prior to Best Friends Animal Society, I was in solo practice and did a ton of work with the animal laws in Michigan. Seeing how bad some of them were applied in some cases, I started to get involved in the legislative processes about 15 years ago. And it's a very busy process, obviously, and you have a lot of opinions one way or the other. And so the exciting part of this initiative is you know what, we're finally taking it to the people. We're going to let the people make the decision to decide how are we going to better the lives of our companion animals throughout the state. And deal with how we can get them out of these shelters a whole heck of a lot quicker than what we're seeing right now, because it's very, very sad in some of the cases that you see, and I'm sure we'll hear specifics. So that is the most exciting part for me, that we are going to finally take this to the people and let them make that decision.
Alina Clark is an assistant Genesee County prosecutor. You handle a lot of these cases in court.
That's right. Yeah, so that was one of the main reasons why I got involved with this, and I'm willing to bet that most people that are listening to this feel the same way, that prosecutions aren't taken far enough for animal abusers. I think that we can all agree on that. And this is going to give us an opportunity to not only raise awareness about what's happening and some of the horrific things that I've seen that nobody should ever have to look at, much less I can't even imagine the poor animals that have endured it. But also, having been involved in other organizations, I understand the connect between violence against human beings, violence even against property. I mean, we're talking even things like arson, the connection between abusing animals that links it to that. And really, even if you don't like animals, this is still an initiative that you can get behind, because it is sometimes a determining factor of more severe things that are to come. So that's why this initiative is so important, and I'm happy to be involved. Now, to be clear, I'm here on my own behalf, not on Prosecutor Layton, who I'm sure can speak for himself, but
And that is a huge supporter, I might add.
Absolutely, yeah, he is. He's a dog owner too.
And I'm here on behalf of Sheriff Chris Swanson.
He's a supporter.
He's a supporter too, baby.
And Will Miller is here on behalf of Will Miller, 16th District, Oakland County Commission. What brings you into this?
Well, to be honest, it's a no-brainer, right? This gives it the basic humane rights that we all have, right? It reduces reoccurring second offenders, right? And being a father and having animals, you don't understand, you would understand the love for an animal. It's the same, right? You feel bad if they're moping, if you don't spend enough time with them. And then being a commissioner, we saw the need, and we actually added FTEs to our shelter, because animals are important.
Full-time employees.
I was going to say FTE.
Yeah, sorry, full-time employees, FTE.
For those of us who aren't familiar with the governmental jargon here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is all about the questions, and we're starting to get them now, so let's dive right into these. This is for Assistant Prosecutor Clark. Why do these cases almost always end up in a weak plea deal, even with the most egregious sadistic crimes? The sentencing guidelines are ineffective and advisory, not mandatory. So why aren't we seeing cases in which the prosecutors choose to depart from the guidelines and seek more commensurate sentences. In so many cases, the police are doing their jobs only to see routine, incredibly weak plea deals.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from. And unfortunately, there is a lot of catching up that we have to do because of COVID, and that we have to be able to move cases and things like that. But what we need to change is the connotation that animals are property. And I think that that's another issue that we have, is that in terms of the law, although we as people see them as living, I mean, I've been an animal owner my whole life. I have adopted cats from our Humane Society. I have a dog, and I love them, and they're people to me. But in the eyes of the law, they're not. So that's something that you have to realize, that even in the sentencing guidelines, while people are counted as victims, animals are still considered property. Now, the initiative won't change that entirely, but it is a doorway that we can start talking about these things, where we're talking about animals as being living property. And that is going to be a huge win. And I think that even us just talking about this right now is going to raise awareness. Even us just talking about the forfeiture process that comes in as a component of prosecution is going to raise awareness. And we can start holding our public officials more accountable.
And police officers and investigators know you have to have plea deals. The system would not function, not only in Genesee County, Michigan, but across the country, because there's just not enough to give everybody trial. So we understand. But there is a balance between, you know, plea deals of somebody who literally tortures a dog to death and gets a 4-year, you know, charge, and then all of a sudden the plea deal is a probation. This list and registry, regardless of what the plea deal is, will remove their ownership abilities to do it again.
Well, and I think that what we have to understand, I don't mean to interrupt you, is that even though it's statutory, maybe a 4-year maximum or a 10-year maximum, while you're right, the guidelines are advisory, because the animals are considered property, that guideline range is going to be low. And most judges still consider a sentence within the guideline range. So that's the problem, is that we are thinking, or in our politicians' minds, the lawmakers are saying, well, this is a 10-year felony. I can tell you right now, anybody convicted of a 10-year felony will not serve 10 years in prison. Almost always. We do have a little bit of discretion within our statutes that the judges can stack. So let's say you have an animal abuser who's killed 3 animals, so they've got 3 counts. The judge can take each one of those sentences and within their discretion decide to stack. So there are things like that that give us a little bit more wiggle room, but I think we can all agree that the punishment's not enough at this point.
And there's so much subjectivity between judges and counties.
All right, here's the next question that's sort of related to that. How can we bring awareness to our judges about live evidence in these criminal cases and the importance of expediting these cases, similar to an in-custody arrest?
Well, I think that a lot of that is going to have to be considering who you're voting for, too. I mean, you speak through your votes. So if you want the judges to know, you can't just write a letter to a judge, unfortunately. You're going to have to discuss this more with raising awareness through social media, things like that. You certainly can, you know, with who you vote for as your prosecutor. Those are the people who would decide the charges. Judges are kind of limited in the sense that it's the prosecution that makes the determination of what they're going to charge. And then they have the ability to plead it or not. So, and just to add on to that, the judges are confined by the terms of the law. So you also have to talk to your legislatures about increasing the law. We have rules on evidence, and that starts to get a little tricky and a little complicated. But things like this, joining things like this, talking about things like this, because judges are people too. You know, they're going to learn about this through you. So spread the awareness, raise it that way.
And that second part of the initiative does define living property. That right now these animals are treated as couches and toasters. And that's why they're stuck in animal controls for 11,000 days.
I'm going to ask you about that.
And so changing the narrative, and that's why Rich said this is so important, because we've not had this moment of time where we can put everybody on the same page and said, stop. Starting from scratch, don't change the sins of the past. Let's start a registry to hold people accountable on the ownership part of it and change that civil process loophole. If we just get those 2, then it's a big win. That will also create a lot of conversations on how dogs are chained, how they're sheltered in winter, and how they're fed and watered. Like, this is something that's the most common conversation that people can have, regardless of a party affiliation. It's unifying, it makes sense, it's got so many different ripples. That's why I think we're going to get a lot of the judges saying, okay, I got to start thinking they're not just property, living property, because the people of Michigan said we want them considered living.
Yeah.
Yep, that would change it. Now, we want your questions. Type them in the chat box. We're going to read them, but talk a minute. You are the largest shelter in the state, and how long these live animals are in cages.
Well, for me, I am most passionate about this piece of the initiative because, you know, we recently did a report and showed 25 animals were in our care for 11,000 days. So you can do the math. If you take one animal,
Yeah, get the calculator.
Hold on.
What is that? What is that?
right,
Yeah.
at $50 a day,
Wow.
right? Most cruelty cases,
30.1 years. I Googled it before the show.
Yeah.
most cases of animal cruelty involve multiple animals as well. So what happens is while a case is being prosecuted, some folks understand this, some don't, animals are most often stuck in the shelter. They are really the only ones punished
That's right.
for being victims of cruelty. The person who hurt them is walking free while they're sitting in jail.
All right, let me ask, because I
Yeah.
don't know anything about
Yeah.
your business.
Yeah.
So you can't even give them temporary homes? I can't be a dog foster parent for a while?
Well, the animals are essentially evidence, so you have to be careful about how you're housing them, the care you can provide to them.
Okay.
You know, we have, right now we have a dog named Tilly who was being beaten with a rope in front of a police officer. Tilly has been with us for over 600 days. Tilly can't be sterilized because we don't own her. She has a really rough time in the shelter, and she's going through false pregnancies because we can't sterilize her. Shelters, no matter how beautiful, no matter how wonderful your staff and volunteers are, animals shouldn't live in shelters. It's damaging, and it's unfair, and it is despicable. We have another case of 6 animals, 4 dogs, 2 cats, taken from a home. They were severely neglected. The couple is also being charged with murder of a family member who abused these animals. They were found in very deplorable conditions. There was a dead dog chained to a child's bed. A horrific situation. Those animals have been with us for almost 1,000 days. That's 3 years these animals are sitting in our care. It is so despicable. Think that's like you and I having to go to jail for being victims of a crime for 25 years.
That's huge.
Yeah.
25 years. It's so unfair, and it makes us wonder, should we be enforcing animal cruelty if they just have to suffer in our care? How is that ethical? We need to do better, and we can do better, right? There are options, and that is what I'm so excited about this change here, is to be able to move those animals out and get them into the loving homes that they deserve. And if I can just talk about the piece, it's not just the animals that suffer. So they're taking up space in the shelter. So one cruelty case animal, I could serve 20 or 30 other animals from the community, right? We're also bearing the cost, the financial cost, the emotional cost. Our staff and volunteers are taking care of those animals, and sometimes animals are given back, even when their owner has been found guilty. We had a cat who was being traipsed around the city with a compound fracture that had become necrotic. The owner refused to provide veterinary treatment.
When it was probably free.
When it was free, absolutely, we would have done anything. We ended up having to seize that animal. She got prosecuted for animal cruelty, found guilty after months and months fixing, caring for that beautiful cat. We had to give him back.
Yeah.
Now imagine being the staff and the volunteers doing that care and having to do that.
Yep.
And this initiative is going to allow us, within 22 days of the first probable cause hearing, to rehome these animals. That's the key, so they're not stuck in shelters. There is an economic benefit to it, but there's a human benefit to it. And when you hear these stories, you know, our Genesee County Animal Control, for a case we have in Genesee County, these 2 dogs were in for 861 days. There's 36 dogs that were seized in December from Flint that have been in there. They're in there for God knows how long at $20 a dog times 36, which is $720 per day. So far, $74,000, taking up space where we could move things. Those dogs should be moved to other good homes. That's where, when I hear from you, to me, that's as big a deal as the registry is getting these animals out of their cages, both physically and mentally.
Okay.
And add to that, Jim, I'm going to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying that she talked about costs. So when it's in a county shelter. That's county tax dollars paying for this, where we can actually home them, and that's just like I said, moving along. So you're not wasting so many county dollars on that.
Now, there is restitution. Sometimes people who are convicted have, right, quotes, restitution, kind of like getting blood out of a stone. It doesn't really happen. If you think about the 6 animals that we're caring for, I think that would equal right now about $300,000. We will never see
Yeah,
see
you're
that.
not going to get anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
All right, here's a loaded question, perhaps the biggest of the night. Who will be responsible for maintaining the registry? How will it work? And who can access it? This is your baby. You want to start with that one?
So let me just start by answering, this is a dynamic initiative, meaning that it's evolving. We've never been down this road before. This team has been together for over 10 months to get to where we are right now. We're registered. We have our big launch on April 11th at the steps of the Capitol. You'll promo it. You have these experts coming here. We don't know all the answers, but what we do know is the process to get things done through the ballot, it allows the people to be heard and the system to answer. We saw that in November. We believe that once the legislators see that people have spoken, and more importantly, I got to believe that they feel the same way, then I believe that that list will be maintained by a state agency. I don't need to figure out who that is right now, but it will be a public registry where people will be able to see the name, the charge, and how long they're on the registry for. We have no interest in, and I'll let you speak on that, re-offending them or charging them with an additional crime by being them public. But there has to be some place that folks can go without costing them, that they can say, I'm just about to adopt this pet to so-and-so. Let me look them up real quick. There's other forms out there, Otis and iChat. But the first point, a state agency, everybody's available to look at it, and it's free.
Okay, I'm going to ask the lawyers a couple of specific questions here regarding the foundation of that question, but this is a balancing act, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have obviously every citizen in the United States has a constitutional rights that we have to be very mindful of protecting. And I made a statement that I think got a little misconstrued that I want to clear up. This is a large analogy between SORA, but it's more like
SORA is sex offender
registry, which is considered unconstitutional by our Sixth Circuit. There's a lot of problems with it, and understandably so. This is not really like that. It's more like iChat and more like Otis. And what Otis is that you can log in. If somebody's in the Michigan Department of Corrections, you can look up their name and you can see their charges, how long they've been in
Prison
custody.
folks.
Yes.
Prison,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm sorry.
State
Thank you.
prison, yeah.
Yes.
And I
thank
think
you for
Otis is
clarifying
an acronym for Offender Traffic
tracking.
Tracking Information System.
Yes. Yes. So this would function like this. It's not going to have your address on it. It's going to have very limited information. It's going to have a name, a date of birth, and what the charge is, and how long you're on the registry for. And that would mean that and it would have your photo as well. But it's not something that the onus is on the individual, that they have to go in and provide their address, that they're going to get in trouble if they don't register. This will be a communication that happens directly from the county clerk to the state. And it won't have to be continuously updated. It won't be as much overhead as you see with SORA, for example, which is a lot of manpower to maintain. So this is going to be a little bit more streamlined and a lot less information. So if you search on iChat, for example, you get a ton of information. You get everybody's criminal background, and there is a charge with that. It's not going to be like that with this. It's going to be very limited information. So we're still respecting people's privacy. We're not trying to punish anybody. We're just trying to protect the animals. That's the function of this.
Richard, do you want to comment on this aspect?
No, I think it's a great idea to whittle it down to where it can be manageable and publicly available, where the public is going to understand what's there, right? If someone at Tanya's shelter wants to take a look and see, is this person we're considering adopting or putting an animal with to foster, has that person ever been convicted of animal cruelty in the state? It allows them to have that information and to make an educated decision on where that animal is going, with far more information than what we already have today.
Let me ask, did you want to say
Well,
something?
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to add that I think it's not really just about shelters and rescues, but the whole community being able to have easy access. So in our county, we've prosecuted somebody who runs a pet store, a breeder, a groomer, somebody who runs a boarding facility for horses. In all of those cases, you would want to know, am I trusting someone with my pet? Doggy daycare is another thing. There are rescues that are not real rescues, but they're taking in surrendered animals. So You should be able to know, who am I trusting my animal with? Or who am I giving my money to? Who am I getting an animal from who might have been convicted of animal cruelty? Because nobody knows that, right? That pet store is still running.
Yep. Now let me pursue that just a little bit more, kind of a reporter follow-up question, if you will. I did some research getting involved in this from my narrow communications perspective, but I looked into Logan's Law, which passed in 2016. It took 5 years to get it through the legislature. A lot of fanfare when it passed in 2016, but it's been watered down, right?
Yeah, I think it's
Is
been
it-
watered down to a tasteless nothing. Basically, it said that, let me say that it was an incredible effort. People had really good intentions to try to get that registry done, but the compromise of Logan's bill ended up being shelters may use iChat. May use iChat. And one, I don't want to do criminal background checks on my adopters. I feel like it's overly invasive and potentially discriminatory. People can have things in their criminal history and still be very loving pet owners. So what
But
I
does
want,
that still exist, or is that gone now?
well, it was supposed to be free to shelters, but somehow that option also just disappeared.
So you don't have that anymore.
It's not even an option.
Right.
And also, it isn't just about shelters. Only 20 to 30% of animals, sadly, are adopted from shelters and rescues, right? Others are coming from breeders or backyard breeders, or they're taken in as strays, or they're going to the pet store. You know, they're getting puppy mill puppies. So, you know, we need to think broader, right? That it's not just about shelters, but about everybody having access to the system and being able to see and protect. We all, because animals are so powerless, right? Our most innocent, vulnerable victims. We all need to step in and find a way to better protect them.
Rich?
Like, just to follow up on that a little bit, like Tanya mentioned, Logan's Law started out very much like this at the very beginning. It was and still is, in my mind, a great effort for those folks to make it through 6 years of through the legislative process, doing all the wheeling and dealing that needs to be done. It's just a necessary function of the legislative process as it went through different portions of the legislative sessions. That's why this is special, because we're going to take all of that out of it, right? And with the people voting on it and having the input, because it's not just us sitting up here. It is everyone. We want the input of people from all around. How is this going to work? And it goes back to what Tanya said at the very, very top. Logan's Law only applies to shelters and animal controls in the state, but that's how the law is written right now. Not Logan's Law, that's how the old law in Michigan relative to shelters is written. So it is something that we drastically need to update, and this is a process that's going to help us do it, because we're going to use the people to do it.
Yeah, no politics.
I'd just like to add is, so this takes the onus off the elected officials and empowers the people to vote this in.
That's right.
And it also gives power to the people to make sure that it's not overturned if legislation change or legislators. So it gives a better initiative. In Logan's Law, it gives it a good foundation to start off, because everybody knows it's there, so it's a foundation, which is great. It took a little while to get there. Now we're going to give it to the people to add to that.
Yep, it enshrines it in the state constitution is what it does.
Yes, sir.
So it can't be changed in the legislative
Only
process.
the people can overturn it.
Yes, exactly. Okay, how will the length of stay on the registry be determined? And when will this initiative start collecting signatures?
I can answer the first part of that question. Do you want
I'll-
to answer
I'll-
the second?
I'll take a second one. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we're thinking about with the registry is that it's going to relate to, there's obviously two types of crimes, misdemeanors and felonies. Misdemeanors are anything that's punishable by less than a year. That will be on there for only 2 years. So if you are convicted of a misdemeanor, meaning either a jury convicts you, you do a bench trial, you plead to it, then you will be there for 2 years and then you automatically come off. There's also different types of felonies, and they will all be named. They all only relate to animals, so that includes dog fighting, animal abuse and neglect, animal torturing, and killing, which is 1 count. And then there's different degrees of animal abuse. Those will be either 5 or 7 years. After that time expires, you will automatically come off. The only other way you can get off the registry is if you do the expungement, which has been a big judicial or a big criminal justice reform that we want to respect with what we're trying to enact. So That's the first part. You want to take second?
The second part is we started way ahead of the game. November 2024, a year and a half, the presidential election, a lot of voter turnout. It makes sense timing-wise. If you're going to take it to the people, do it where the people are going to be, November 2024. We started this far out because to get something on the ballot, which we saw last year, Proposal 1, Proposal 2. Proposal 1, when you're talking about term limits and things that people aren't really thinking about every single day, the people that pushed that initiative took it to the legislature and said, Republicans and Democrats, will you vote to put it on the ballot without the signatures? And they did.
Because it affected them, right?
It affected them.
Right.
Yeah.
Second proposal, when it came to voter rights, they had to collect signatures. And to get something on the ballot statewide, it takes 10% of the total gubernatorial vote from the previous election. So we anticipate that being about 550, 600,000 votes. So we want to target 750,000 signatures to get, so we don't have any that are going to keep us below that threshold. There's 180 days to do that. We have been in concert with a lot of great people that got both of those initiatives on the ballot. They love what we're doing. So simultaneous, if we have to get the signatures, we're going to do it. We're all going to see to it, and that's where we need your help. That means that we're going to go to the state from Monroe County all the way up to Marquette to Iron River, all the way down, and we're going to try to gather the signatures, and we believe that we have the power to do that. The second thing is we also believe that the legislatures that have a lot of things on their plate right now will see the value of this unifying proposal. And we are also trying to get them, when the time is right, to say we're going to put it on the ballot. And we're going to take the money that we'd normally spend on gathering signatures and put it into marketing, put it into messaging. Those are the two things we're doing. It's simultaneous, but as soon as we decide that, okay, we can't do option A, option B with the signatures is where we're going to need everybody's help. And in either way, it's going to get on the ballot. That's the next
So
step.
this is a call to action.
Yes.
This is a call to action.
We don't have a start date yet,
Right.
right?
Right. This is a slow roll. Think about today as a pre-launch, April 11th being the actual launch, but we are going to work behind the scenes to do the things that these two, and Tanya, probably because of the lobbying part of it, you're probably great at informational, but these guys are on the front row when it comes to the Lansing part of it. I'd love for you to chip in. Do you think this is something that Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate can say, yeah, we want to do this, our constituents want it, and we're going to put it on the ballot. You don't need to work hard getting the signatures. Spend that money on marketing.
No question. No question. Like I said, animals hit the heart, and I don't see any side of the aisle saying no to this. It doesn't even make sense to say no. So I think that'll be the fast track way to get it done, which is good for the ballot initiative. So we put it in marketing, and it's not costing so much, and we can get it done sooner and just start getting more people on board.
That's great.
Yeah, but either way, we're going to need your vote in November 2024. So I don't know what number proposal will be, but make sure you vote for it.
That's right. You can't miss it either.
And the communication device for this ongoing with communication to the people will be the website, protectmypet.com.
Right. I mean, it's like anything else. Think of starting a brand new business. That's what we're doing here. A brand new business with something that solves a problem and fills a need. But it's still a brand new business. That's what we're doing. Is we're starting from ground zero 10 months ago. To get to where we're at right now is beyond my expectations, but yet I still expected it. Where we're going to go 90 days from now, even more so. So this is about you having these talks, sharing this video, and sharing your story and talking to people. That's why we're taking it to the people. Let the people decide. It's hard for any elected official, right here, me and Will, elected official, to deny what the people want. If they come knocking on my door saying this is what we want, it's my duty to represent them. And that's what I think has gotten people like Rich frustrated and the people going through the legislative process because they had such good intentions. But we want to remove that burden from them and say, listen, the people, we lifted the work. We did it. They spoke. Take action and get it done. That's what happened last November. We can do it in November 24.
Okay.
Well, and I think also right now we're interested in hearing people's opinions. You know, we've reached out to a lot of different interested stakeholders and different people that have different perspectives. And I think that that's really important with making sure that we're getting a full 360 view of everybody who this is going to impact and be involved. What's your opinion? What's something we need to think about? What's something that, we need to be concerned about? All of those things are important to the implementation, which I think is why we started so early.
And we just got that same example brought to our attention yesterday from Reddit, where somebody was talking about the mental health crisis of somebody who maybe doesn't realize what they're doing, and there's this conflict, a hoarder of some sort. So, I mean, you have, again, I'm the arresting agency, you're the trial agency, but judges are also involved. When that happens in the court system, tell them the diversion that's in all counties.
Yeah. So I, in particular, my mom was a social worker growing up, so I'm acutely aware of all of the mental health issues and how woefully understaffed and under-resourced the criminal justice system is in relation to that. What you have to realize as prosecutors, when we're making a decision to charge somebody, obviously their mental health will be taken into account. And if somebody's incapacitated or you can't prosecute them if they're not criminally responsible. There are processes in place to make sure that they are protected. And there are other routes we can go through if they have a guardian or something like that to make sure they don't have animals. Now, the point of when we do get to charging, we then can start the forfeiture process, which the government cannot take animals away from people. You can't without due process because they're considered property. So that's why sometimes they get charged. But that doesn't mean that they're going to go to prison or all of these terrible things are going to happen to them. We have some really amazing diversion courts, thanks to our Supreme Court, that have really pushed mental health court, sobriety court. Yes, all of these things. There's all kinds of different processes. So is mental health a component? Absolutely, but it's not always. It can be indicative of other things. So that is certainly something that your prosecutors are aware of and is taken care of in the criminal justice system. Not as much as it should be, but it is getting better.
Okay, hold it. We're going to get our money's worth with you. Wait for it, because there's some frustration out there.
Okay.
And it's in this next question.
Okay, I can't wait.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, please pause.
Yeah, my niece had cancer at a young age, and so she's a survivor. She had a unique cancer where kids normally didn't survive. She survived, and the 3 pets that she had, the dogs she had, like you could just see the smile on her face, even when she was going through treatment.
Yeah.
So it's back to that positive mental health too.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the hardball now? Here we
Well,
go.
let me just say we do also have a pet that is a good support dog that helps people testify. So we do good things sometimes.
Sure.
Justice. Okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah. And this is to protect pets, not to re-harm individuals. Right.
Here's the question. We have had issues with judges who feel that expediting criminal animal seizure cases or civil forfeiture cases violates the defendant's due process. How can we correct this mindset?
With this initiative. So what we're going to do is we're really going to fix that problem, because right now, and I will tell anybody, even as a lawyer, I read the forfeiture code and it's about as clear as mud, to put it in one of my coworkers' words. What we want to do is streamline that, make it cleaner. There is actually case law out there, even as early as or as recent as 2019, that indicates that what we do as prosecution, the first step that we have to do is called probable cause. It's called a preliminary examination. So we have to do probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause that the defendant committed the crime. That is much higher of a threshold legally than what the preponderance of evidence does. Now, while there is case law out there, that's assuming that everybody is up to date on the law and that it's being argued in front of the judges. So this law will make it very clear that hearing in and of itself is sufficient to still honor the due process, still honor the defendant's rights, not take away property without them having the right to be heard, and all of the things that our Constitution guarantees. So the answer to that question is this initiative. So make sure you vote for it.
And we already do it. We do it for those that get caught up in drunk driving. They lose the privilege of driving. We do it with kids that are in a household that's dangerous. We take those children and put them in a safe home. While the process is working, get them out of cages.
Yeah. Well, and it's the difference between people being considered people and animals still being looked at as property.
That's right.
All right, so this kind of goes along with that. If the court is mandating holding the animal, why isn't the court obligated to pay for the boarding? Is it true that if your prosecutor allows, animals can be placed into foster care pending a criminal case outcome?
That is a complicated question. So read me the first part of the question.
Okay, can we go back to it, please? They were already advancing to the next one.
I thought it was going to be a quick answer.
All right, if the court is mandating holding the animal, why isn't the court obligated to pay for the boarding?
Okay, well, the court doesn't have its own income.
Right.
The court is funded through taxpayers and through people that pay filing fees, things like that. So the court doesn't have its own budget, we'll say, to
Right.
just start paying for this stuff. It's all kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So that's why we can't do that. I don't even know that they have enough money to really pay their staff adequately, but that's a whole separate topic.
So, and then that's the second one, which we talked about. Is it true that if your prosecutor allows, animals can be placed in foster care pending a criminal case outcome? You can't do that right now.
Right.
That's where you come in with the 22 days, right?
That's where.
And that's where
I think
you're.
that's really
you're-
critical, because even if one prosecutor allows it, we're talking about an entire state. How many prosecutors?
They're 83, right?
Right.
Yeah,
83
that's
counties.
the elected, and then how many people they have underneath them.
Yeah.
Right. So the key with the initiative is that it's uniform across the state. And so we're not reliant on every single judge, every single prosecutor. We know that animals are undervalued by some, right? We know that that animal cruelty is underreported, underprosecuted, underenforced, and underpunished. But we can find more ways to strengthen and protect ourselves. And I just also want to point out, just as Alina said, as a former social worker, nobody loses when you protect animals better. Nobody.
Bingo.
Right? There is a deep tie between animal abuse and human violence, family violence, community violence, other crimes.
Property
It can be property crimes. It can be predictive, as we see with mass shooters or serial killers, a red flag, the reddest of flags, we call it. But it also just goes hand in hand. They also just happen together. It's the cycle of violence, except the animal doesn't go and hurt anybody else. Unfortunately, they're the only ones hurt in that cycle. So this is one really great way where we're going to take something to the people and say, we want to fix some of the gaps in the system and find better ways ourselves to protect these animals.
Well, and going back to wanting the court to pay for it, there is a procedure in the current law that nobody, like Alina mentioned earlier, for lawyers even, it's very, very confusing and it's getting more and more confusing. This is going to bring uniformity and streamline the process. And where we need help is going to be getting the word out there on the process, right? Because 15 years ago, this was being talked about, this civil forfeiture process, and why do animals have to sit in the shelters? We shouldn't be talking about it anymore, and this is exciting because let's get rid of it.
Right.
Let's stop this conversation going forward because we need to do better for both the animals and the people in our state.
All right, let me show you how smart the audience is watching this right now and thinking about this and asking these questions live. This next question is right on point. Is this legislation going to change Michigan law so that pets are no longer categorized as property?
I would love it, but that is a huge, huge undertaking. We can only do so much. So this is going to open the door. Do I hope that it gets there? Absolutely. Will it somehow impact maybe how we do the sentencing guidelines? Certainly. And the sentencing guidelines are not created by our legislature. That comes from a whole separate body. But we're going to get there. Our first step is going to be defining it as living property. Going in and changing the meaning and definition is a whole nother, not, excuse the pun, whole different animal. So that is going to be something that we're going to hope to accomplish down the road. In and of itself, this proposal will not change that definition, but we are linking in the living property portion, which is, I think, vital.
That's what takes them to a new home instead of a cage.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Can I ask one more? I can tell you one more thing.
Yeah.
He talks about uniformity. Right now, as a sheriff, when someone brings someone to jail, they have to have that individual charged with a warrant within 72 hours. Okay.
We try for 48.
48's the goal, but we get to push it if there's extenuating circumstances, hospital visits, something like that. From the time they're charged, they have within 14 days to have a hearing, and everybody knows that. So we can get uniformity through this.
Yeah.
We can get everybody on board because right now we already have a great example
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, it's possible.
And here's how smart the audience is. Since the defendant can waive their right to a preliminary exam, how would that affect the forfeiture process? They could delay it, and then
And that's definitely
the animal's
something-
delayed too.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's the problem that we're seeing now, especially when people continue to push out their exam. Or what if they don't even have an exam? Like, let's take it a step further. What if they end up pleading to a misdemeanor? That's something that this proposal is going to address. Believe me, we have it on our minds and we're going to get it in there because that is absolutely a problem that we have now.
But even if they do waive, that docket has already been recorded that the exam has been waived and is pushed up to circuit court. That's the start of the 22 days, and then
Yes.
we'll put them rehome. So whether they waive it or they have the exam, the key is that animals have to be rehomed within 22 days. We do know this too. We're not going to solve every problem. There's 83 counties with judges and prosecutors. What we're doing is what was said over here is we're creating a uniformity. The pet registry for people, so you know on the other end, do I give this person a pet? Do I trust this person? And I have the discretion to say yes or no. Number two, let's get these animals rehomed.
Yeah, so let me step on that or continue
Yeah.
on that. What he's saying is that even if a person waives their exam, what we're going to do with the language is we're going to cut off a period that if you don't do something within 22 days, they're automatically forfeit. So that is definitely taken into account. So don't get concerned about whether the judges their dockets are too long, they're getting congested, they're pleading things out. This is something that we're going to address. Absolutely.
That's why we have lawyers on this team, Brooke Tucker, Lena Clark, and Rich, because we don't know these answers, but we want to make sure that what ballot language is the final approved language, it answers these questions and everybody knows what they're voting for.
That's a good question.
All right, let's
It also impacts, Jim, we have folks who just never show up to court. We have
Yeah.
a dog who's been with us for 6 months, and the person who abused him just never shows up.
they
So
abscond.
in this case, we would have an answer for
Absolutely.
that.
That's right.
Why would abusers get off the registry in such a short amount of time? Wouldn't they just go back to their old ways after only 2 to 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, I feel you. I do. I think that all of us that love our animals like they're people would want them to stay on there forever. But we have to understand that there has to be a balance with constitutional rights. And one of the things that we're going to run into is the cruel and unusual punishment. We've got a ton of language as it relates to SORA where you're punishing for someone for too long. And our courts have spoken and told us what is considered cruel and unusual punishment. So we're trying to honor the law that's already set so we don't spend all these years in litigation after the people speak and this ballot initiative passes that we're now, gutting it out all over again in court. So this is something that it's a good place to start. We'll see how it goes. It's not to say that maybe in the future we can consider something different, but we have to make sure that we're still honoring other people's constitutional rights, and that's why the terms are what they are.
Do we have a habitual offender option too?
Yeah, if you are on there for 3 times, have a felony, then it is for the life. That will obviously still honor clean slate so you can get off if you get the expungement, which there's things that you have to go through to even qualify for that. So there is still the potential, and I totally understand where you're coming from, like, oh great, so we got to wait for 3 more convictions, 3 more long drawn out prosecutions. I understand, I do. But like I said, it's a balance, and this is something that we have to try to find both.
Do these changes affect all animals or just dogs and cats?
Oh yeah.
All of them.
Companion animals with a hunter's and a farmer's exclusion, because we want to make sure that people know that there's the freedoms to do those things. These are farmers and hunters that don't torture, beat, starve an animal to death. And I can speak to that. Last week I did a story on a crush video. You can go and Google crush videos where females are being recorded unclothed, crushing the skulls of helpless hamsters, gerbils, mice, and domesticated rats, and recording it and selling and monetizing that video. You can hear the skulls crush. You can see the blood explode out of the head. Like that individual, we know because it happened in Genesee County, they went to a pet store to buy their companion animals. And they're helpless animals. So you can buy a dog and abuse that, or if you're crushing the skulls of hamsters, you give up your right to, because that video is horrific to watch. So it's defined, goes back to the court. What is a companion animal? A domesticated animal, one that is more than just a dog. People have iguanas and turtles, but you can't starve them either. It's not just about happy cats and dogs.
Yeah, and it's not going to be based on the animal. That's not going to be the language. The language is based on the charge, the conviction. So that's already defined within statute.
What about wildlife? Shouldn't this cover all the animals covered under the current cruelty laws?
It is. If you're convicted of animal cruelty, you will be on the registry.
So the proverbial somebody shoots an arrow through a duck or a
Well, you have
What's
to
their intent?
you have to be convicted first.
Yep.
I mean, we're not just going to say, well, I'm going to call on my neighbor who,
Yeah.
I don't know, shot a deer, because I love deer. I have a family of hunters. Don't mess with their hunting stuff.
But deer,
totally
yeah,
respect
there's
that.
a deer hunting season,
Right,
obviously.
correct. There's still laws that govern it, so if you do it outside of the law, or it's not allowed, or you don't have a license, for example, if you are convicted, trust me, your prosecutors know what they can and cannot charge. If you are charged and convicted of these crimes, then you will be on the registry.
That's the beauty of this whole thing. It involves all the three processes of government: legislative, executive, judicial branch. We want the courts to look at each case individually and determine, using their own discretion, was this a case of pure accident or vicious, intentional torture?
Right.
Just like a farmer runs over a dog, breaks its leg, 45 minutes away from the nearest animal shelter or animal emergency room on a Sunday night at noon. I don't want that dog to suffer. You know, I mean, but you're not going to just torture it to death.
Right.
That's the discretion of the courts.
Well, and there's language too with the elements that we have to prove for torture. It has to be over time. I mean, there's certain things that we have to look for that there already are safeguards in for people in that circumstance within the law. So we're building on it.
I feel like this is becoming a seminar for attorneys. Listen to this.
Sorry, I'll
Will
stop
this
talking.
no, here's why. Will this be similar to the bond or forfeiture provision in MCL 750.49?
That's what we're working on streamlining. That's it. That and
know this statute?
750. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You guys know the statute too. I mean, this is something that's
This is,
within
I
the
think
world.
that 49 relates to dog fighting, and I think 50 is for the abuse and neglect. So yes, it'll incorporate both.
Will this apply retroactively or
No.
only for convictions after passage? It's not retroactive, is it?
No,
Yeah.
that's against the
Yeah,
Constitution
that's
also.
yeah, it's not constitutional. Keep the questions coming, folks. We're going to go until around 7 o'clock, but we're live, so keep them coming. Put them in the chat box. What is the process for obtaining the necessary number of signatures to get it on the ballot? You kind of addressed this, but you want to address that again?
Hard work. I mean, hard work. We want to see people face to face. We want them to understand what their vote. That's why we want to keep it very simple. Rich said before, we want to simplify it. We don't want to just make it so complex. Want a registry? You want to get them out of the cages? Then sign here.
Yeah.
It's going to take some groundwork across every county of the state. Plus, we have the ability, there's some great organizations that this is their business of collecting signatures, and it is very costly, very, like in the millions, to get something on the ballot for 10 million people in Michigan that are registered to vote, of those 10 million, to actually put it on the ballot and then vote on it. So again, that's the process. We have 180 days to do it from the start of the first signature, but we have a couple other options that Will talked about that we're hoping to do. But we know that there are great rescues out there. There's great pet food supply stores out there. There's great organizations. It's going to take all of us to get this done if we need to get the signatures. But one thing I do know is they both can make happen because we saw it last November.
Yeah.
Is there lobbying going on in conjunction with the ballot initiative in case it fails in November of 24?
It won't fail.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You asked the
We've got
wrong
some-
question.
We're not failing.
You got some very competitive people here. We've done some initial polling. It's got an 87% probability of passing. And here you're talking about people that not only love animals, we have the emotional connection, but we're also very empirical. We understand facts.
Yeah.
So when you have something that's so passionate to people that makes sense and you're solving a problem, we believe it's going to pass. So there is no option. If this doesn't pass, then it goes right back to what Rich said. We'll go and see these same stories, and I'll keep still doing briefings about skulls being crushed and animals being starved while a guy goes and sees his starving service dog 2.5 weeks back to back to back while he checks his mail and doesn't decide to call to get help or feed the dog. Or we can go back to the same guy who doesn't like what his girlfriend got for breakfast last Easter and rapes her at gunpoint and then runs down the street after she's being raped, and then he shoots and kills a dog on Facebook Live. Or we can do the same guy who stabs a dog 22 times because his neighbor, he thought, set him up on a domestic. We can go back to that.
Yeah.
I personally believe we do this because that's what the people want.
Yeah.
All right, here's another question. Would law enforcement still need a warrant to take an animal if the owner refuses to surrender the dog or cat when animal control tries to seize it?
So this is an interesting question because there are certain exceptions to the warrant requirement. There are exigent circumstances. I'm not going to get into that right now because they're very fact specific, and this is something that would come into police training. And this law is not going to change that. There are certain exceptions to the warrant requirement. Otherwise, yes, they're going to need a warrant to take it. What you have to remember is that despite the fact that we love our animals like people, and believe me, I do, it's still considered property within the law. So it's still the government taking someone's stuff. So there has to be a due process. There has to be probable cause, all of these types of things.
Will this apply to minor defendants, kids?
So how this is going to work is obviously we have the juvenile code that none of that is going to be public record. You don't if you're a juvenile. If the decision is made that the juvenile is charged as an adult, understand that the judge still has the ability to, in certain circumstances, depending on how they're charged and whether it was a waiver hearing and stuff that I will not bore you with because they're legal nonsense, they can be sentenced sometimes as a juvenile or as an adult. If they're sentenced as a juvenile, no, they're not going to go on the registry. If they're sentenced as an adult, it's possible. We're still working out some of the language, but I think that is where our tent is lying right now.
This is a great question. I wish I'd thought of this. If this registry were live and in effect today, is there any idea how many people would be on this registry right now in the system, trying to understand the volume of successful misdemeanor or felony convictions related to animals across the state? How many people would be on it right now? Guess.
It's not going to be a whole lot, I'll tell you that. It's not anywhere compared to how many sexual offenders we have convicted.
Well, so take what you know, Genesee County, which is in terms of population size.
It would be less than 20,000.
Where are
sure,
you?
I'd say like
Fifth, sixth largest?
Fifth largest county in the state,
Fifth,
Genesee
okay.
County, right?
And so out of that, you'd have approximately,
Well,
ballpark.
I've prosecuted probably 3 or 4 cases that got up to me in circuit court, and I carry a docket of about 200 cases.
Not
So-
animal cases.
No, I'm saying in
yeah,
general.
yeah.
So they're a very small amount, which is something that, obviously we need to improve on is prosecuting them more. So I'm thinking I maybe no more than a couple hundred just in our county.
But here's the thing that is so important. This initiative is going to raise to attention
Yeah.
those topics that have not been talked about, even beyond this registry. So whether there's 40 people on the registry or 400, they would never have been identified before this. And with this initiative, those 40 will become 400 in 5 years from now. It's not because those crimes aren't happening.
Right.
It's not because they're happening now. They're either underreported or never reported.
Right.
And so by doing this brings a whole new light on a topic that all of us know has happened. Nobody wants to report it because it's disgusting. Showing videos of animals getting killed, the reason I do that is to provoke emotion to take action. And that's what we're doing. So I know that, I don't know if there's a number to say, okay, there's this many people on the registry, we've succeeded. If one person's on the registry and that one person keeps from owning a dog or a cat, from killing it again, we win.
Well, and let's also talk about the link between that and domestic violence. Because
Child abuse?
Yes, exactly. A lot of times these animals are used as a part of the power and control in the domestic violence cycle. So not only are you helping the animal by this person now being on the registry, now that we have this person, yes, like the Time magazine points out, we have people who use the animals to hurt their partner. So you're almost getting 2 birds with one stone
right.
in the fact that you're also protecting the animal, but you're also protecting the partner because now we know this person can't go out and buy animals again for at least the time they're on the registry. So, I mean, the Time magazine, the FBI, there's so many different reports about this. If you just Google it, the evidence linking them is just insurmountable.
Yeah, let's make that clear. There was an article in Time magazine
August
last
2022.
August. Yep, that said, and you can Google it. You just go to Google and type in Time magazine. Let's talk about animal abuse, and it'll bring up that article by
About accountability.
Mark Levine.
Why are we not talking about accountability?
Yeah.
Yep, and that's where the figure came.
Right.
43% of mass shooters in a school setting have abused animals.
Oxford shooting, Buffalo shooting, Uvalde shooting, Parkland shooting, Jeffrey Dahmer. There is a direct connect between
Tim Bundy.
mass shooters, domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, property abuse. You can go see the ASPCA in their own article say 70% of all domestics involve a threat against an animal in the house. Of those 70%, 90% follow through with a physical domestic abuse. There are people out there that are watching little kids, watching their kids. The story from Macomb, the guy's beating a dog while the kids are running around the house. Like, what does that do to the psyche of a child thinking, if they're going to do that to our dog, what are they going to do to me?
Right.
All right, we're going to wrap this up, but here's the call to action. What can we do within the community to help and make these changes happen?
10,000 people, April 11th.
Well, that's the
what
next
Lance said.
question, too.
That's what Swanson wants.
So April 11th is going to be a rally on
That's
the
right.
steps of the state capitol.
It's
in
National
Lansing.
Pet Day, and we're going to have a pet rally.
I was going to say, why April 11th? Because it's
National Pet Day. And it makes sense. And thanks to our team out there. I mean, we got Todd Lanning and Brooke Tucker and Kevin Sylvester, Mike Tokarczyk. We've already filed our paperwork, been approved. So we have the spot from 1 to 4, and we're going to just go to the People's Corner. And our friends will be here, and bring your pets. And we're going to announce that this is the day that we want the state to see that we are going to bring this ballot initiative to there. And it's going to be a day of celebration, and it is April 11th.
Make sure you check out the website too.
That's right.
We had a ton of stuff going on there.
All right, this is kind of a lengthy question. Should I get it in before we go? This person says, I believe that early intervention can deter and help prevent future escalation, not only for animal crimes, but crime in general. Are there any plans in place in conjunction with animal control to step up enforcement of misdemeanor animal neglect and cruelty, such as 24/7 chaining, leaving dogs out in severe weather, inadequate food, shelter, and water, not only with citations, but with follow-through to ensure that the violators appear in court, correct whatever it is they were cited for, and most importantly, make sure the animal's needs are immediately addressed?
So that's either Jennifer Drake or Kim Gray. If not, somebody who thinks just like them, because we have addressed this. We do know it's not going to solve everything, but like I was just saying today, if this empowers people to go and take action because the registry has shown that people want this, our animal control is not run by the sheriff. Monroe County, Troy Goodenough, the sheriff, he runs his animal control. But we have an investigator assigned to animal control. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of these problems solved because now we're taking something that's not been talked about like it should have been, front and center. Just like we're doing with now these mass shootings, we're talking about it more now. Like people understand what's right in front of them. I think that's what's going to happen. But we can't solve everything on the ballot initiative. But yes, the chain laws, the no kills, that's how you guys even started, is removing the kill centers out there. And so think how much progress you've made that got us to this point. And that's how we'll introduce you to us because, hey, they've already got fruit on the tree. They have formed. Now, what, 90-some% of all shelters are no-kill shelters?
Yeah, people are just really passionate about animals. They care deeply. They don't want them to die needlessly, and they don't want them to suffer.
That's right.
And they can make donations through our website as well, which I think will really help raise awareness also. But one of the things that the initiative will do is it's going to help with that forfeiture process. So if there is a prosecution, even if the defendant doesn't do what he's supposed to do and he absconds, for example, that's where this initiative will still be able to keep those animals out of those cages and get them out into healthy and happy homes. But don't forget, you can always report these crimes. I think a lot of times people forget that you can call. You can say, hey, my neighbor's got this dog out. The case that I just most recently prosecuted, a guy had 9 animals, one of them was dead. And when the investigator from your office asked what he was going to do with it, he said, well, I was just going to throw it in the trash. That case was initiated by a neighbor calling 911 and saying, hey, there's some dogs out here that look really bad. And that's when dispatch sent out animal control. Animal control reached out to other agencies. In our county, it's usually the sheriff. And here we are. Now this guy's convicted and he's in prison.
I want to get a couple more questions in. We're running a little bit over, but so
Will
what?
wants to talk about. Go ahead. You guys.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was good. Well, I was going to talk about that at the end.
Oh, okay. All right. Good.
All right.
The ask.
They're watching us in the UP, the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah.
Good.
Listen to this. If animals are forfeited in 22 days, can restitution be asked for treatments that occur after the forfeiture? Our shelter in the UP had 217 dogs, 23 horses seized from a puppy mill, requiring many medical treatments for almost 6 months.
Yes. Yes, you can get restitution through the Crime Victims' Rights Act.
But our goal is to never see that question asked again.
Yeah.
Will the person be put on the registry if the original charge of animal abuse gets dropped under a part of a plea bargain?
No, that would violate due process. It has to be a conviction to one of those specified crimes.
What type of evidence would be necessary to prove animal abuse?
Ooh.
That's a big.
I don't think you want to know the answer to that.
That's a long answer.
Pictures, videos, and dead animals.
Yeah, I am so grateful for the work that our animal shelters do.
Unbelievable.
They come in and testify for us. They photograph as well as our investigators.
Yeah.
And sometimes testimony from neighbors. You know, it's a combination of things that take to get these convictions, because believe it or not, it's a lot harder to get a jury to agree with me that somebody committed a crime than you would think.
The Crush video case I just did, the video was given to us. We saw the video. We Googled the location. We used that in order to get probable cause to get a search warrant. I personally was on the team. We hit the door, 2 little kids, a babysitter there, animals in the house. Went to the actual room that we saw the video being recorded, matched up all of the dimensions, searched the house, found the glass tabletop that was used, had a lumen test done, which traces blood products, saw the blood pattern. That's how we got the probable cause to get the charges. That's how those things happen. There's a lot of steps to make sure there's enough evidence, but I can tell you this. When we have a charge of animal abuse, I can only speak for Genesee County. It's legit.
All right, we're going to wrap this thing up. Well, I got one more question that just came up. With many of the recent developments with some irresponsible rescues that are being investigated, what generates credibility to an organization to gain access to the registry, especially since rescue organizations are not regulated? Well, this is going to be open to everybody.
Right.
It'll be, yeah, public.
Yeah.
Anyone can search it.
So that kind of answers that.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, if I could just say one thing,
Please.
I think they bring up a good point, and it goes back to most animal industries are not regulated. There is no oversight.
Tiger
There is
King.
no government oversight whatsoever. Not pet stores, not groomers, animal shelters in a very minimal way, not rescues. That's something people need to understand because the animals can't talk. It's why evidence is so hard, right? You have to have physical evidence because animals can't say what happened to them. So we do need more and better oversight of industries that have animals in their care. We should fight for that too, right? We should demand better. But in the meantime, there's some other things we can get done as well.
Okay, final thoughts. I may come back to you. You may want that to be your final thought, but final thoughts. Sheriff, you want to start?
I'm going to pass it to Will, and
Okay,
then
go ahead.
I'll end up as the anchor.
Yeah, first I'll say I don't recommend checking out the Crush videos. My stomach still turns even just thinking about it. That's just my advice. But as elected official, I know that campaigns cost money. So the ask is to donate. You can go on the website and donate. Ask, and then to get involved, ask your elected officials to get the when we have the ballot out there, get signatures, go to your school boards, go to your city councils, your county commissions, your elected officials. By doing that, if you just turned in 2 sheets, each elected official, we could get this done no problem.
Right.
And it's like, again, donate. It's a huge initiative. We're going to need the money. Appreciate you donating and joining us tonight.
Alina, final thoughts.
Well, I just want to say thanks to everybody being here and watching. This is obviously something that's important to all of us. Like Tanya said over and over, these animals can't speak. We need to do something. We as individuals, not just in our jobs, but as human beings, need to make sure that we're raising awareness about this. Share our website on your social media. And tell everybody, you can donate, you can report crimes, you can see all of the news articles, you can even let us know what we should be addressing that's not there yet. And then when it comes time for signatures, please be there. You're going to have to do the work for us, with us, and together we can get this passed. I have no doubt in my mind. So every single person, if you just even donate 1 hour of your time, it would be huge.
Richard, final thoughts.
Spread the word. Communication, get it out to everybody that you know. I mean, we know that folks, we saw in Genesee County how important years ago it was to improve our shelter and how important animals were in our community, and people came from all over the county, all over, up and down the road, protesting, coming to Board of Commissioners meetings, talking to their commissioners. Half the people in Genesee County, I would say, found out who their commissioners were and started working with them. Spread the word because these animal issues are very, very important to folks. And you know what? It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, there's no political affiliation here whatsoever. These folks, we really want to see everyone involved. And if we're spreading the word, it's going to make everyone's job a little bit easier to get this across the finish line in 2024.
Tanya, you're the big player here.
Yeah, and let's get animals stuck in shelters into loving homes. That's a really critical piece. It is criminal the way we treat our victims of animal cruelty. Let's get them a loving home.
Sheriff, you have the final word.
So I mentioned about that dog that was shot and killed on Easter Sunday, 2022. And before we got to that dog, there was a neighbor. And this was in a very violent community who was watching from his front window this go down. And when the dust settled and the victim was taken and assaulted again, and that dead dog was laying there on the side of the street, he went to his barn, got a shovel, and in his own front yard dug a shallow grave. That guy gets it. He couldn't stop the violence, but he could do something about it. And it's those kinds of individuals that are on the panel and those people watching right now. If you're serious about protecting animals and protecting domestic partners and children, then do something about it. Show us. Show me. Don't just use this as another check in the box to complain, to tweet. Go take action. Be like the guy who dug a shallow grave for an innocent animal on Easter Sunday. Those are the people I'm looking for.
All right, so there's more to come. Go to protectmypet.com for much more information. That website will be evolving. This is an evolving process. We will have a launch date for the start of the petition drive. In the meantime, we'll see you on April 11th in Lansing.
With 9,999 friends.
Come on down. All right, thanks for being with us, everybody, and have a good night.